Good evening. The following
podcast
is brought to you by Patreon. Visit patreon.com/
Friends with Deficits
for more information.
Patreon, it's what makes this
podcast
so awesome.
Feel free to talk about or not talk about whatever you want to talk about. And I feel like this topic, it's like I have an after hours portion of many of my podcasts, and it feels like this whole podcast is like an after hours segment.
Gotcha.
So I'll have to cue the after hours music right now.
Okay.
Friends with Deficits After Hours.
Hi y'all, I'm Adam Sultan, your host, and this is Friends with Deficits. My next friend is Shelby Hadden. Shelby's a filmmaker, and she recently made a film called Tightly Wound, which is an animated documentary that she wrote, directed, and is the subject of. We'll be talking about that and some other things. In fact, she'll be telling you all about her vaginismus. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that right. So kids, it might be a good time to get your folks a drink. The rest of you adults, stick around.
Friends with Deficits.
Vaginismus is a pelvic floor condition where the muscles in and around the vagina involuntarily contract, which causes penetration problems, pain, and an inability to have intercourse.
You've had that for a long time.
Yes, since I was 14.
How did you know that you had it?
When I got my period for the first time, I tried using a tampon, and it was the most painful experience I ever had. And it felt like there was just no hole there, and I could not get it in no matter what I tried. My mother would always just tell me to put more Vaseline on it and try different angles, and I'd be reading the instructions from the box and, trying different positions, but nothing worked. And I went to a lot of doctors between the time I was 14 to 21, trying to figure out what I had, how to fix it. And eventually I found physical therapy, pelvic floor physical therapy. And when I started that, it took a few months to be able to use a tampon, but I was 21 at that time. I was in and out of PT for about 4 years, and the last 2 of those years I was going once a week. I was really determined to meet those goals, and I was finally able to have sex for the first time when I was 25.
You described this in a Bedpost Confessions, which is a talk show. What do you call that?
I call it storytelling series.
A storytelling series. I should know because I've been on it so many times. Sorry, guys. So yeah, you described that you lost your virginity at 25. Mm-hmm. And you're now 25, 26?
Yeah, almost 27.
Okay. Has it happened more than once since then?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Same partner?
Nope. When it first happened, I was in South Korea, and it happened with someone who was attending the same wedding I was, but he lives in Vietnam. And then I had a boyfriend last year, and I've dated here and there since then, so.
Cool.
Yeah.
How is it now having sex? I'm kind of playing it backwards here, but
that's okay.
Starting from
Yeah, for the most part, it's fine. It all works. Every once in a while, though, I'll come across a day where, like if I have my period, I cannot get a tampon in, and I don't always know why, but it's just like, oh, she's angry today. Just like, not gonna do that. And sometimes that happens with sex as well, but it's not very often.
That's good. Are you so now you have a pretty active sex life, or is just here and there kind of so?
I wouldn't say it's super active.
It might be if you comparatively to the last however many years.
Definitely comparatively, yes.
Do you feel, all right, let me ask you this. You have the film Tightly Wound, which is amazing. I really thought it was very cool. Well, and we've already spoiled the fact that you've had sex since it, and it mentions that in the movie. Mm-hmm. Like, now that this narrative has changed, do you feel like just time to move on to other things, or are you still trying to kind of talk about this, raise awareness of it?
I definitely want to keep talking about it, and my animator Sebastian and I want to do kind of parts 2 and 3 of the Tightly Wound story and animate some short films based on those. But I'm also like right now looking for other projects too. It's a lot to make a film about yourself and something so intimate. And so some days I'm like, I just don't want to talk about it anymore. Yeah. I'm sick of people asking me about it. Most people didn't know that I had had sex when I started making the film. Like by the time we started raising money to make the film, and by the time I actually did bedpost for the first time, I had already had sex.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but like a month before bedpost. Like it was like all right there.
So you lied to our audience here.
I don't think he was lying. I told a story.
That's true. I'm just kidding. Every story I've told there has been a lie. So, but
it's just in the past.
Yeah.
I'm glad that happened because I think that it helped me get through some of the tough parts of being so vulnerable and public about it, that at least I wasn't struggling so hard with the physical aspect of it.
Yeah. Have you been in contact with people who've had vaginismus and like found a lot of...
Yes, I've heard from people all over the world. I hear from somebody at least once a week, and the stories are all so similar. A lot of really bad experiences with the doctors and medical professionals, everyone telling us that it's in our heads, that we should drink alcohol to loosen up and just relax. I was told that before I was even of drinking age.
Wow.
Yes. And then I also just think it's really problematic to tell young women that they should drink when they want to be intimate with someone, because I think that could really set them up, especially if they don't have a partner. You know, like that could set them up for some bad situations. I feel a lot of anger when I think about that. And, you know, I've had doctors just not examine me because I wasn't sexually active. And, you know, like, why would that have to be a precursor to get checked out? You know, like, well, you're not sexually active, I'm not worried about it. I'm like, I'm worried about it. I came in here because I was worried about it. I think there are a lot of people, I've heard the same, they've been told the same things from doctors. A lot of people have told me stories about dating and rejection and divorce and being worried that they couldn't have children. And I think it does a number on how people feel about their bodies and sexualities.
Yeah. You also mentioned you couldn't have sex. So had you had any kind of sexual relations that didn't involve intercourse?
No, not really. I think, one, I just have always not been very lucky in dating, just like even before any of this. And then also, I think whenever it would start becoming sexual, I would start panicking right away because I just would be worried about it, especially when I didn't know what it was and I didn't know how to explain it to someone. And
what about masturbation?
No.
No what?
No, I'd never done that because any touch down there was just really painful. And
so what about, was your clitoris affected?
I don't know. I don't know if I could even answer that question because I just never tried. Like, I was just so afraid of anything sexual, of anything touching that area, that masturbating was not even something I considered doing.
But you didn't discover it until you had your period? So then that means you hadn't discovered, didn't play with yourself or experiment before that?
No, I hadn't. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting when I read people's memoirs and hear people's stories about their first sexual experiences or masturbating. And I'm just like, I don't know. Like, I don't know why I didn't, like, that just wasn't even on my radar. I was just like, I just want to like read books and like play kick the can. And I don't know. I just like never, is.
That's funny. What about now?
What about now?
Have you experimented with masturbating now?
I'm still really struggling to transition from feeling like a patient, and like anything down there still feels very medical if I do it by myself, because there was a lot of dilators and vibrators and stuff that I would try. And so I have this really strong connection to this clinical, medical, like work.
What about when you've had sex? Mm-hmm. It's been the same thing? Like, are you thinking of it medically until it's... No, but I think for by myself, it still just feels very removed. And I just associate it with work. I'm just like, oh, that's something I have to figure out. What about like sexually now with partners? Are you kind of opening up a whole range of experimentation or discovery, or is it just kind of about intercourse?
I don't know. I don't really know how to answer this question.
I don't know how to ask it.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if I feel comfortable answering this question.
Okay. I mean, I do want to. I'm curious about your sexuality and what you're comfortable sharing about that, since this is obviously tied in so hugely.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about your film for a minute.
Okay.
Well, the story's great, and I enjoy how it's told because it's animated. Mm-hmm. I'm curious about the transitions, too. Everything was very cleverly kind of morphed from one thing to another, objects changing into things. And so is that your writing? Is that the animator? Is it a combination?
It's definitely a combination. I would give Sebastian more credit for the transitions. We spent a lot of time together writing the script. We would go to a coffee shop and we would start storyboarding and just riffing off of each other and coming up with the most crazy ideas we could. And part of it was, I'm like, well, he's got to figure out, he has to draw it. And he would come back and say, I want the lime to turn into the fan. And then later we see the fan again. And I was like, yeah, that all sounds great.
That's cool. And you did all that, you did the voiceover and the acting as yourself?
I did, which was really hard. And I must have recorded my voiceover in the studio 3 or 4 times. It still makes me cringe a lot.
I thought about that a lot, where you have to moan or express some frustration. And
mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I made so many weird little noises. And sometimes the sound recordist or sound designer, Corey, he would say, why don't you just do that? Like, go in your closet because your clothes will make nice sound blankets, and just record some stuff on your phone or a Zoom recorder or something, and when you're not in front of a bunch of people. So there were like weird little sounds I had to make, and then my friend who lent her voice to the young girl character who asks me for a tampon, how old is she now? She's starting high school and she's an actress. And so I was like, okay, we have this line, but also could you cry for me? So all the times that I cry, that's actually Amalia crying.
That's nice.
Yeah. So I'm like, I don't think I'll be able to do that. But it was fun because every single person whose voice is in the film is close to me in some way. Amalia, I had worked with when she was like 9. She was in my grad school film, and I'm close with her family. And my mom played herself, and my physical therapist played herself. And then all my like friends are actual friends. And then the guy who plays the jerk, he's a friend who's an actor. So
he was good. He had a very jerk sounding
yes.
kind of mannerism and voice. It was good. Were there a lot of so-called jerks or just guys like trying to go out with you in your early 20s and stuff? That like, did you have to turn away a lot of people, or?
I didn't turn away anyone. They all turned me away, especially before I was public with all of this. You know, every time I was dating someone, there was just so much anxiety about when do I tell them? How do I tell them? And then it just never went well when I did.
Was it always at the moment? Like, were you about to attempt to have sex, or was the guy about to do that?
Yeah, for the most part. And people have like said that to me, like it was my fault that I did that I would tell people in the moment. And it's like, well, but they never had a conversation with me about how they felt about sex or intimacy or anything. So I kind of was just playing defense for as long as I could.
I think it's hard with, anyone, but especially young people. They're not, you don't get any real training. It's all going to be out in the field, and it's so awkward a lot of the times. And there's no, let's have our consent talk now, or let's, describe our feelings about this.
Right, and I wish there were, because even like now that I'm dating, and sometimes in these situations, I'm like, well, I guess I have to bring up, like, when's the last time they got tested? And nobody wants to have that conversation. And I'm like, but if we're going to be doing this, like, we should be having this conversation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, and then I just find out that a lot of people don't get tested and, like, don't really take care of their health or think about any of these things. And it's like,
Yeah.
Nobody would initiate those conversations, but they would initiate physical things, and then I would start to panic and stop, and then they would press for answers. And a lot of times I didn't want to tell them. I didn't feel comfortable or ready to tell them. And, but they kept pushing for me to tell them why I didn't want to do it, when no should have been enough. And then I would tell them, and then they would react badly. And and people would say, well, it's kind of your fault for telling them in the moment. What ended up happening was I became public about the film. And so then everybody kind of knew.
Okay.
And, like when you're a filmmaker, everyone asks you what film you're working on. And, so I tell a lot of people about it. I'm like, yeah, I'm making a film about my experience with pelvic pain, and they ask a lot of questions, and I'm not shy about it on social media. So it's been good because I'm having those conversations with people earlier, and I think it weeds people out that they already know, like, if that's not something they want to deal with, then they don't have to ask me out. So
I guess the last or the first person you had was very patient, it sounded like, and which is obviously a better way of working with it. Yeah, and the guy in South Korea, it was just all kind of funny, and we talked about it in a bar, and we then like agreed, okay, we will, and he didn't care what the outcome was. He was like, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, and it's like not a big deal. Yeah, so it's taken a lot of pressure off of having to tell people, since it's just already out in the world. If you Google me, it's like the first thing that comes up. Yeah, it's like there's a headline that's the woman who can't have sex. Oh man. Damn it. Yeah. Now when you actually have any instances of it coming back, do you get that cycle of anxiety and tension, have to work with that? Or is it more you're okay with it and it goes away? Like, what are your strategies for it? It's more, it's okay, it'll go away maybe tomorrow. Like, if anything, if you exercise, you're like, oh, today I had a terrible run, and there's nothing really you can do about it, and you just hope that tomorrow is going to be a better one. So luckily I haven't regressed in any way, or I haven't felt like, oh, I should go back to PT. So you're not in physical therapy anymore? No, I graduated last year. Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Congratulations. Thank you. You said a day. Sometimes, like today's a bad day. Does it take a whole day for it? Once you feel this tension, is it last a day or several days? Or I would say just a day. It's hard because I don't really notice it until I try to insert something. So if, like if it happens, I probably won't try it again until the next day or a couple of days later. So, but usually it just, like if I have a bad day, then the next day everything's fine. I think what I have now is more of just a blanket pelvic floor dysfunction. So vaginismus is characterized by the involuntary spasm.
I don't really think I have those anymore. I think it's more just my muscles down there tend to be really tight. And so some days it is just tension, and it's like, okay, well, you know, when I have a bad day, it's like, okay, make sure to not cross my legs when I sit. Make sure to like really take a lot of deep breaths and not do any crunches or sit-ups or anything like that. So there's some things I do to avoid making it more tense.
Crunches and sit-ups do that? Mm-hmm. Do you do any kind of specific exercises now?
Not really. I probably should. I've gotten out of a lot of that practice. You know, happy baby is a good one.
That's a yoga posture, right?
Yes. Like up dog's good. Sometimes if I feel tension, I'll try like just using a vibrator or something because it's a little more comfortable than a dilator. I try to just avoid doing dilator.
Does that not count as masturbation?
I don't think so. It doesn't feel sexual to me.
Okay, so it's a medical device at that point.
Yes.
Like an actual vibrator. Like the origin of vibrator ostensibly was, oh, I've got a sore muscle in my neck. You know?
And it was like, and I mean, a lot of sex toys were first invented to help people who had dysfunctions or disabilities be able to have some sort of sexual experience. So yeah, so it feels very medical to me. Yeah.
Is sex, you know, actual penetration good for it? Like,
I'm always like, oh, yeah.
Because here's a prescription for you. You know? You're gonna be the happiest woman and the healthiest.
Yeah, no. I definitely think like whenever I do have sex, I'm like, okay, everything's working down there. Like that's good. But yeah, I mean, like I've had doctors say the more you use it, the better it gets. But when I was going through it, that was really tough to hear because I'm like, well, I don't have a partner and I haven't been able to do it yet. So like, what does that mean and what does that look like?
Did you know anyone growing up that you were already friends with that had anything similar?
Yep. I had one friend in college who told me that she had it, but she never had any problems using a tampon or anything like that. It was because she could not have sex with her boyfriend. And she showed me her dilator kit. And the one she had, all the dilators were larger than a tampon. And I was like, damn it, then what am I supposed to do? And it didn't take her very long when she started using the dilators. I think I had a really severe case. Like a lot of PTs told me that it was.
In the movie, you describe how you never feel like you could fall in love or have a boyfriend. Mm-hmm. But it seems like that's not dependent on having a functioning vagina, so to speak. You feel like it was? Or you...
That's how I felt since I was in college. And since then, you know, even I was in LA last weekend for a fundraiser for the film, and we had a patient event, and lots of them had husbands and boyfriends and committed partners. So then I was like, it's just me. I think it definitely has not helped because I have been rejected for that specifically a lot, but I also just think I've had a lot of bad luck and it just hasn't really worked out.
Did you have any like young crushes or any kind of anything prior to puberty and all that kind of thing? Mm-hmm. Were there any boyfriends at that point or whatever?
None. Like I never even had the middle school boyfriend that you hold hands once and like nothing like that. Like I was the person who, if a boy came and asked me out, it was because their friends at the lunch table dared him to, and they were all laughing at me. Yeah, I had to ask people to go to prom with me. Yeah.
So it seems like then you probably had a very quick transition to that and like, let's try to have sex now.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like people weren't even attracted to me until I moved here when I was in grad school, and I was 21 at the time. So before 21, I was just like, people just find me repulsive. And then all of a sudden, people were interested in me, but they wanted to have sex like right away. And I think that's a huge expectation now. It's just like, it's this thing that people don't usually talk about when they start dating someone, and they're like, oh, this is the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And probably because of the prevalence of porn and all that, people are very hypersexualized, and
porn and online dating and, you know, Tinder and everything. If some guy wanted to be with someone who could have sex right away, like, then why would they wait for me? They could swipe on every single woman in the city. Yeah, I think it's hard. And I have some friends who don't have any pelvic floor condition, but just maybe aren't as sex positive, or just don't want to be having sex early on with someone. And like, dating's really hard if that's not what you want to do.
It's so hard in our society to talk about anything really, but but sex, and talk about your feelings about it, and talk about things up front. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I
filmed this great program called Remix. Have you heard of Engender Health? It's an international nonprofit. They have a domestic office here. All of it's getting shut down because of government funding, but they taught this amazing sex education course, and I filmed all of the sessions, and it's taught by a health educator and then a young teen mom, and they talk about consent and like sexuality, and you know, they're like, some people don't like sex. I'm like, no one ever says that. Like, why can't we talk about a range of feelings and experiences? And that program was LGBTQ inclusive. Like, they really opened up amazing dialogue for these young kids who they would write like anonymous questions and like, well, what's the big deal? Like, does it really feel that good? And
that's hard to fathom. Like, part of me is like, admittedly overly corrupted by sexual desire.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like, part of me is thinking, well, if you don't think it's that big a deal, maybe you just haven't experienced it the way you need to, or something. But I also understand that there is a wide range, and we should honor that.
Yeah, I think we talk about sexuality being a spectrum, as in being interested in men versus women, whatever. But we don't talk about it being a spectrum as in how much you like it or how much you want to do it.
Yeah. And probably because of society, everything is so, not sex positive, but sort of sex forced.
I like that, because it's not really sex positive. It's easy and fast and fun, and you know, that's not everyone's.
Yeah. Like,
I love Shonda Rhimes shows, but I hate like every scene where, you know, there's a look and then they start making out and then the music swells and then, you know, it's like a music video and nobody talks about anything beforehand. And like, it's just really romanticized, and yeah, it's just like easy. They're just like, okay, let's go do it in they're like break room sort of things.
How do you place yourself on the spectrum now in terms of the interest?
Yeah. I don't know. I guess somewhere in the middle. I feel like I lived so much of my life without it that I'm like, I would be fine if I never got to do it again, you know?
Have you experienced orgasm?
No.
No? Mm-mm. Are you trying to, or is it just if it happens, it happens?
Yeah, I feel like I've been talking to some doctors about it. I think I need to get some hormone testing done because I've recently done a lot of research on birth control, and I've been on it for like 10 years, and it really messes everything up. And yeah, I think I need to start digging into that more. Getting on birth control, I tried a lot of birth controls, and like I would have terrible mood swings, and like one, I just sobbed for like 2 days. I couldn't get out of bed. One, I had a period for 21 consecutive days.
Whoa.
Yeah.
I know some people have birth control to regulate their periods and that kind of thing.
Yeah, which is why I originally got on it.
Okay.
Especially because I couldn't use tampons, so I didn't know when my period was coming. And I was like, well, I can't ever plan a beach trip because I don't know when I'm getting it, and then I would have to stay inside or just like wear shorts and not go in the water or like signing up for a half marathon or something like that. So that's why I originally got on it. But now I'm like, well, it's fucked everything else up. So women's health, it's the worst. And again, that doctor, she was actually one person who didn't want to examine me, and she didn't really want to give me birth control. And I'm like, but I want to be regulated. So she's like, okay, I'll give you birth control. And that was the conversation. Doctors are just people, and a lot of them have, like, they project their own morals onto you. And, you know, I had one doctor tell me that she wanted to hug me because I wasn't sexually active. She was like, that's just so great that you're 21 and you've never had sex. I'm like, but I'm here because I want to. So how can we make it happen?
Was she saying that for some moral thing? Like, wait,
yeah.
Thank God you're waiting till you get married, kind of?
She said that, and it's like, I never said I wanted to wait till I was married, but she was projecting her own morals onto me.
No good, doctors.
No good. So I get they have a tough job, and I know with insurance, and you know, it makes things really hard for them, but I also just don't really trust them anymore.
Would you, if assuming you could get off birth control and your periods were fine and emotions, would you opt for just condoms, or would it have to be some other method of birth control?
I would probably want to have something on my end, just because some people don't take no for an answer or whatever.
Guys, yeah.
So I would feel more comfortable if on my end I was doing my part.
Yeah. So the question I ask everyone almost is the benefits of whatever you have, in this case, vaginismus. Mm-hmm. Do you see any potential benefits?
Yeah, I think it weeded out a lot of jerks. I'm really glad I didn't date those guys longer than I did. And I mean, I'm really happy with the work. I'm really proud with the work I'm doing with the film, and there's other events I do, and I know I'm making a difference for other people. So, you know, if that's what ends up happening, then it was worth it. And I'm glad I could be that person for someone else.
That's great.
Mm-hmm. I think a huge part of my healing journey was because I was writing about it. I was writing Tightly Wound. I was starting to get the pieces together to make the film. Like, you know, like I think producing Tightly Wound and writing about it and speaking about it, and it really helped me control my narrative, and it helped me feel a lot better about myself and my body. And Vaginismus was something that pushed people away for so long, and then all of a sudden it became this thing that brought people closer to me. And I think that was so instrumental in helping me like reach my goals. And you know, like some people will write to me like, well, I can't wait to get better so I can help people like you've helped people. And you know, I tell them like, you don't have to wait until you're completely better. No one's gonna give you permission to use whatever skills you have or whatever platforms you have. Like, just do whatever gives you control over a situation and like allows you to have some agency in it. And I think it was just so helpful for me.
That's great. It's very inspiring.
Yeah,
that's good. I think that covers it.
Yeah.
Feel good?
Feel good.
Great.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Thanks to Shelby Hadden for talking with us, and thanks to y'all for listening. If you'd like to know more about Shelby's film and to see a trailer, visit tightlywoundfilm.com. If you'd like to be part of the Friends with Deficits community, sign up for our newsletter, ask a question, or even suggest a guest, please visit friendswithdeficitspodcast.com. I'm Adam Sultan. Take it easy.